Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is November the 23rd, 2015, just a couple of days away from Thanksgiving, so this will be the Thanksgiving show. Maybe we'll get to say some words about the holiday coming up, but the United States and the rest of the world finds itself in chaos now as a number of major terror attacks have taken place across the world. The crackdowns begin at home and abroad. The war machine gears up to ride again. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, and it seems the world is becoming a much more dangerous place. We're in a much more precarious situation than we were even a few months ago. Whether we're talking about the terrorist situation, whether we're talking about the domestic crackdowns, or whether or not we're talking about the Syrian war, the confrontation that is looming between NATO and the Russian bloc, which could result in a confrontation that affects every single one of us personally. So we're going to try to talk as much about that as we can. For those of you who just joined us for the first time tonight, you can catch Truth on the Tracks here every Monday night and Friday night on ucy.tv at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can go to the show's personal webpage, ucy.tv/TT, for Truth on the Tracks. You'll find all kinds of things on that page. But, of course, you can listen on the UCY homepage or wherever you're listening. We're also getting rebroadcast in a number of different networks and locations, which we always encourage. So if you have an outlet and you want to broadcast this show, then please do. Now, if you want to keep track of my work, as I mentioned, I write for activistpost.com, naturalblaze.com, theantimedia.org. If you're interested in my work specifically, then please go to brandonturbeville.com. That is the website where I post all of my articles, all the YouTube videos, all the archive versions of this show. All of the relevant information is there. The books tab is where you can find the books. There's a store there as well. A link to my bio, contact information, etc., etc. All that stuff is there. There is some unique and original content at brandonturbeville.com, so it's not just a clearinghouse for the stuff that I've sent out to other places, right? This is there's lots of information that's exclusive to the website. So in any event, please go to brandonturbeville.com. The traffic that we've been getting at brandonturbeville.com has quadrupled in the last several months. The listenership to this show has tripled in the last several months. So you need to get on board here. This is information that's in demand, and we are starting to have a serious effect in what is happening across the world, and we hope to continue to do that. Now, just a quick announcement about the books. The Difference It Makes, 36 Reasons Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President, is now available in print form on Amazon.com. You can find that there. Just go type in the title or type in my name. You can find the book. It's for $9.99. It's not very expensive. Holidays are coming up, after all. We want to get this out to as many people as possible before the Democratic primaries, because we don't want the Wicked Witch of the West to get the Democratic nomination, much less the presidency. So get this book out. There's also the Kindle version, which is only 99 cents, only because they forced me to charge. So you can get the Kindle version as well on Amazon.com. If you don't even have 99 cents, but you can read it online, you can read it on your computer, your Kindle, or your tablet, I should say, then just go to brandonturbeville.com, and at the top right-hand corner of the page, you will find the PDF that you can read for free. Just click on the icon of the book. There's the icon in that little box there. You click on that, and that will bring you up to a Scribd PDF version. It's free. You can download it. You can just read it right where it's at. It's up to you. Read it, share it around, do what you want with it. Get it around before the elections, before the Democratic primary. Get it around as soon as possible, so it's free. And this is not a labor of greed. This is a labor of love and necessity, I guess we should say, because not trying to make money on this. We're just trying to stop the worst case scenario from happening, and that's what we're attempting to do. Now, the world situation. Last week we went in depth into the Paris attacks, and what we did. I can honestly say that I was the first person out of the gate to discuss the potential for this attack being a false flag. If you look at my article, 9 Reasons to Question the Paris Attacks, you'll see that I was the first writer in the alternative media to question the official story. And those 9 reasons still hold water. As I mentioned on the show, we went into more detail on the show, but these there are more reasons to question these things. So I want to mention these things briefly. I don't want to belabor the point of the Paris attacks. Now, it's been over a week, and the problem is we cannot go chasing after every false flag trying to disprove it, or else we will always be chasing our tails. But nevertheless, because there's been so much happening, I just want to go over these things briefly. Now, one of the things I want you to be aware of is that 2 days after the Paris attack happened, we had more evidence that came out suggesting that it was indeed an operation designed by Western intelligence agencies for ginning up support for more Western intervention in Syria. We've got an interview given by Patrick Pelou. He's an emergency medical services specialist. He was one of the first responders in the Paris attacks. He spoke to the radio station France Info, and he's apparently confirmed that an emergency drill was ongoing during the morning of the same day as the attack, so Friday the 13th. The source for the interview is contained in a video with the French language broadcast with English subtitles, and I've got that in my article. Emergency drills took place on morning of Paris terrorist attacks report. You can find it on the website and take a look at it, BrandonTurbeville.com. The translation has Pelou stating that, quote, as luck would have it, in the morning at the Paris SMAU, the EMT, a multi-site attack exercise had been planned, so we were prepared. What needs to be known is there was a mobilization of police forces, firemen, EMTs, associations who came to participate, and we tried to save as many people as possible. That's the quote. So drills, we have drills. What are the hallmark of a false flag terror attack? We also talked about the hallmarks of these attacks last week, so you'll remember that. Now, Pelou is a contributor for the Charlie Hebdo magazine, interestingly enough. He was also one of the first responders during the Charlie Hebdo attacks. So we also have that. We should mention that the UK conducted counter-terrorism drills earlier this year that included scenarios that involved terror attacks in Paris, similar to the ones that took place at the Charlie Hebdo massacre. We had, as those reports surrounding the UK drills were released, there was a number 10 spokesman who said, quote, it had been agreed that future exercises which take place on a regular basis should seek to learn from events in France. And then we had David Cameron saying that there was a need for police to, quote, call on military help if there was a major emergency. So we have that in the UK drills. Pelou's comments come in tandem now with a report from SOFREP, that is the Special Operations Forces magazine, that the French National Police had met with the B&D Federal Intelligence Services of Germany and the BKA Federal Police of Germany to, quote, discuss an imminent pre-planned terrorist attack in Paris. Over a week ago, German police apparently stopped a heavily armed suspect with what they call an arsenal of weapons in his car, and he had GPS coordinates plotted into his GPS device for Paris, and neither French nor German intelligence acted upon this incident. So we know at least one of the attackers was a Frenchman who was on a terrorist watch list for 5 years. Despite all this increased surveillance that came after Charlie Hebdo, they were not able to stop him, interestingly enough. So that's one of the issues here. Now, in terms of the passports, we have to mention the passports. These things are amazing. We should now manufacture cars out of the same material that passports are made of. We should build houses out of passports. We should build skyscrapers out of passports. The military should wear passports for bulletproof vests and IED protection. Humvees should be made of passports. Why? Because these things are indestructible, according to the official story and according to the Western intelligence apparatus. They're indestructible. Jet fuel can melt steel beams, apparently. It can melt huge skyscrapers, but not paper passports. Plane crashes can destroy human flesh, and the plane itself can disintegrate into thin air, but not paper passports. They're still intact for us to see who it was that carried out the attack. And now in Paris, a suicide bomb can detonate, destroying the vehicle, destroying the person, being so loud that you can be heard from the inside of the stadium over the cheers of soccer fans, yet it can't destroy a paper passport. Those things are kept intact so that we can see the identity of the killer. You have to be kidding me. It was allegedly a Syrian passport. Well, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. It's not believable to say that a suicide bombing of that magnitude would not destroy a paper passport. Leave aside the question of why you'd be carrying your passport if you're going to engage in a suicide bombing, but put that aside. It's just not believable to say that. So apparently, we all need to manufacture the same material that is embedded in these passports. It needs to be put in cars to protect you in a crash. We'd end highway deaths in that way, right? We'd put them in bulletproof vests. These things are made of unbelievable material and strength. So the passport situation, to me, and I think to many other people, is just beyond belief. Now, we want to also mention a couple of other things so we can move on, right? We've got the questions of whether or not these guys, these terrorists, were known by the intelligence authorities, and they were. This is what happens in almost every single attack, right? We have these guys who are followed by the intelligence agencies and essentially handled and allowed to do their dirty work. Now, we've got a report by Reuters, and the report is entitled "Spider in Web Mastermind of Paris Attacks Killed in Raid." Okay, so this is what we have from the Reuters article. Quote, "In addition to the suspect on the run, police believe at least 4 other people helped organize the mayhem. Investigators believe the attacks may have been ordered by Abdelhamid Aboud, a Belgian national now living in Syria, where he has become an internet propagandist for Islamic State under the nom de guerre Abu Omar el-Belghiki, the Belgian. Belgian media have reported that Salah Abdeslam spent time in jail for robbery 5 years ago alongside Aboud. We have numerous reports here that, again, Aboud was in prison for robbery. The guy was a known jihadist. He was acting essentially as a propagandist for the Islamic State with a criminal record. So he's being watched. He's on the radar of the intelligence agencies. And keep in mind, too, that these guys they live in a country that is anything but free, right? The French can come out and talk about how they support, we have to stand with our traditions of freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom in the French history. This is bullshit. There is no such thing as freedom in France, right? You can go to prison if you question the official story of the Holocaust, and we're not commenting on that. We don't deny the Holocaust here. This is irregardless of what you say. What you think about that issue. If someone cannot question the official story of something like this, then you're not free. If a person can't simply say, "I don't believe what the government's saying," and they can go to prison, well, that's not freedom. They have no right to defend themselves in France. The economic stranglehold of people like Francois Hollande has become so tight that they can barely afford to live. I'm sorry, what freedom? There's no freedom. So that's another thing. So there's a police state, right? There's a surveillance apparatus that's massive. There is the ability to arrest people without charge or trial. Yes, that does exist in France, and they use it. So we have this guy now who's on the list. Abode is on the list, right? He's working for Dabiq, apparently. Dabiq is this magazine of the Islamic State. We can see a license plate from outer space. We can shut down a marijuana legalization rally of 5 people. We can shut down their Facebook pages and shut down their Twitter pages, but we just can't seem to shut down an online magazine by the Islamic State. You got to be kidding me! But these guys have quite the publication here. The Dabiq is got graphic designers. It has credits. It does interviews with jihadists. It's like it's its own underground, and this is something that it goes around quite frequently, and nothing is ever done about it. So he's working with Dabiq. He's been in prison for robbery. He's quickly identified, right? Because he's obviously in the purview of the French intelligence agencies. Now we've also got Abode claiming that he was arrested for attempted murder and terrorism, but he wasn't detained, according to an article in the Daily Mail. We have this article entitled, see if we could get the title for you, Sick Taunts of the Paris Mastermind, Jihadist boasts of freely crossing Europe's borders and mocks police who had them in their clutches. All right, so that's the title of the article. And apparently, as I said, in this article, he argued he's told others that he was in prison at one point for attempted murder and terrorism, and we're told that we have no idea that the French intelligence had no idea that this guy would have done what he did. Well, he was in jail for it only a short time ago, and you let him out. So you gotta wonder about that. That's another interesting part of it, right? These guys are in jail for something that if anyone else had committed the crime, they would have never seen the light of day, but somehow they get out. The charges get dropped. They get to lead a normal life until all of a sudden they commit a suicide bombing. Now, one of the other interesting things that we have to look at here, again from the Daily Mail, are the reports of the suicide bombing girl, Hasna Ait Boulachin. I think I pronounced that right. Hasna Ait Boulachin. Okay, this is the girl. She's 26 years old. She was a suicide bomber during the siege. This is another interesting part of this whole program. Now, what we have in this case, and again, and several of these suicide bombers in France, we have them being followed by the intelligence agencies, right? We already know that the French government knew about them before, right? We also have this other guy, according to the Daily Mail, again, has been, I would imagine, accidentally reporting these stories and being very helpful to those of us who are following it. We had one of the terrorists involved in last night's Paris attacks have been officially identified as a Parisian, according to local media reports. This is the article, Hunt for the ISIS Killers. One terrorist identified as young Frenchman known to authorities. Another 2 found with Syrian and Egyptian passports. And this is Mostafai. This is the gentleman by the name of, let's get his full name for you. Just give me a second here. Yes, Mustafa, that is his name, right? The government here is saying that he was radicalized by a Belgian hate preacher, a preacher at one of these mosques who had gone across France and spoke at these mosques, and we're being told that he was on the terrorist watch list for 5 years, and in the police state that is France, they were not watching him closely enough to stop him. Well, I'm sorry, that's not believable, and it's also not believable that in a country that imprisons individuals for saying things that are even minorly disruptive and considered so-called offensive, that these guys would not be harassed and arrested, right? These guys, certain people are more equal than others, can go around all across France promoting hatred and violence and destruction and war, and nothing is done, right? Nothing is done. They're left alone. It's obviously because they want to have these young people radicalized, and this can happen on this type of basis if you promote these religious leaders and that sort of thing. Now, again, we need to get back to the girl, Hasna Ait Boulashen. Right, she's 26 years old. She was a suicide bomber during the Bataclan siege. And this is interesting, right? Listen to the title, first of all, the Daily Mail article. Exclusive. Extraordinary selfie of terror mastermind's cousin shows girl blown up in St. Denis siege who never read the Quran, liked to drink and smoke, and had a reputation for having lots of boyfriends. What is this? Muhammad Atta's sister? This girl is not the profile of a terrorist. She's not an extremist. So what's going on? She was constantly taking selfies. She wasn't dressed as the fanatics and savages tend to dress. She never read the Quran, but allegedly is going to blow herself up to promote the message in the Quran. Really, that doesn't make any sense. She likes to drink and smoke. She's such a fanatic that she wants to kill herself in the process of promoting this religion that she does not adhere to. So none of that really makes much sense. She has a reputation for having a lot of boyfriends. Well, considering the company that she was keeping, wouldn't that have made her a candidate for beheading or something? All right, so here's another thing. She was described by friends as an extrovert. She loved booze. She loved to party. Neighbors said she smoked and went around with a lot of different guys. Her nickname was the Cowgirl. She liked to wear big cowboy hats. But listen to this. When she went to detonate her suicide bomb, she screamed, "Help me, help me," before her head flew through the window after the bomb was detonated. Why would a suicide bomber scream, "Help me"? She screamed, witnesses described her screaming, "Help me, help me," and "I'm not his girlfriend," seconds before this device was detonated. Well, isn't that interesting? I have to say here for Miss Ait, I believe you. I don't think this was a situation in which she was a willing participant. So it makes you wonder whether or not she was somehow forced by intelligence agencies to do this. It seems very difficult of a situation to put together, right, to really place together. But also whether or not we're running out of willing patsies. Are we now, I mean, the population of terrorists and monkeys are dwindling because they've gone to Syria and they've met their death. And there's only a number of these animals to go around, and some of them are being shipped back out of Syria so they could be used for things like this across the world. You wonder now if this is not an indication that the population of fanatics who are willing to go through with a suicide bombing or are so deranged mentally or have gone through some type of MK programming, or whether or not they're dwindling, and now we have to force people who were not involved in this at all to engage in a terrorist attack. She seems to not have wanted to go through with any of this. We can only wonder how the events played out, but this is interesting, right? Was Hasna a victim of some type of forced mind control program? It's quite possible. Was she simply forced at gunpoint to do what she did? That's quite possible, but it was clear that she didn't want to do it, and that maybe she was fooled into thinking that she was taking part in a terrorist attack sting or some type of operation. We can only speculate at this point. So there is that. Now, of course, what happened after the attacks? We've got the French bombing Syria. What did I tell you last week? That was going to happen. The French were going to bomb Syria. Of course, anybody could see it. Anybody that was paying attention. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean most French people. That doesn't mean most Americans. And that's a shame. Now, so we've got that. We also now have terror attacks in the Radisson Hotel in Mali. Mali, of course, and this is on a similar vein to the attacks in Paris, right? Because this is a hotel, sure, but it's a public arena, public event, public place, I should say, and people jihadists have stormed the hotel. They've taken hostages. They've killed a few. There's an indication of bombs, suicide bombs, and that type of thing. So it's a very similar style attack. And what else does it have in common with the Paris attacks is that Mali is considered within the French sphere of influence, right? Mali has a presence of French troops. It's still there. Remember, we had terrorists taking over Mali last year in a massive ISIS-style campaign, right, where all of this happened all under the nose of the world intelligence apparatus and the world military apparatus. And now we've got the presence of over 1,000 French troops apparently permanently stationed in Mali. Well, now we have a bombing in Mali. It's apparently the terrorists, the same jihadists, and they go in, they kill anything that moves. Last time I checked, 22, maybe 25 dead, somewhere in between there, and then we have the French being forced to react again here. So what is this? There's a number of possibilities. One, of course, the French need a premise, a problem, so they can pose the reaction, which is the crackdown at home on what little civil liberties still exist in France, if any. They also need a pretext for greater engagement in Syria. And we also saw before this attack, Hollande was more hesitant. He did not mind the rhetoric. And remember, early on, he wanted to lead the charge against Assad. During the chemical weapons, Hollande was ready to go in and fight and die to the last American. But he was ready to lead the charge initially to overthrow Assad. So his rhetoric's been right out there. We also have the question of the Palestinian recognition. We have the question of whether or not Hollande really was ready to continue to engage in sanctions against Russia. He did state that the sanctions should be removed. And then we got Charlie Hebdo shortly thereafter. Was Charlie Hebdo a warning to Hollande? What was it? Not necessarily a warning to Hollande, but a warning to French society and so forth. If you go down this road of warming to the Russians or cooling to the Israelis, you will experience terror attacks. But Hollande is by no means a victim. Hollande is a warmonger. Hollande wants to go to war with Syria, and now Hollande gets to go to war with Syria because there was hesitance, of course, at one step of the game in terms of economic sanctions and, of course, the Palestinian issue. But the war with Syria has always been on the agenda. The French have been frothing at the mouth to get into war with Syria. We cannot forget that. They sent a small delegation, I guess we should say, of jets to bomb the desert and civilian infrastructure with the United States. after a French journalist was killed, right? After it was shown that the French population was not amenable to major scale warfare in Syria, we had a French journalist killed, and then we had Charlie Hebdo, and now we've got the Paris attacks, and now we've got the Mali attacks. So we see these attacks popping up all over the place. So this bears the new question in mind: is this the new normal? And I'm afraid that this might be. This is a situation where we are entering a world of perpetual terror, and this is what is somewhat disturbing, right? Because we know what the terror is coming from. The terror is coming from intelligence agencies. It is directed for a purpose, a propaganda purpose. But it also in order to guide the will and the pulse of the people in a direction that the intelligence apparatus, the deep state, wants them to go, and we should know that. But still, it works. It works. If you're scared to go to a concert, if you're scared to go to the mall, if you're scared even to go to the grocery store or attend your son's high school football game, then terror is embedded in your mind. And unfortunately, with the increase in terror attacks, people have a legitimate reason to worry about going out in a public place. Because what if, even if you know who is controlling these terrorist attacks, it doesn't make it any less real if you're a victim of them, right? So my point is that whether it's ISIS, whether it's a lone wolf gunman, or whether it's the CIA, you're still just as dead if you're a victim. So people are aware of this, and it affects everyone. If they're afraid to go out in public, if they're afraid to have public events, if there's an increase in security to the point that it's like the TSA just to get into a concert or to get into a book reading or something, then we have entered into a world that is Orwellian, to say the least. In fact, as Orwell wrote about some of this in 1984, where there was random firing of missiles into neighborhoods to continually keep the populations terrified into believing that they were under attack from another country, that they scarcely could remember who they were at war with. This is the same thing with ISIS, right? This is what we're getting. So are we entering a time in which we may see perpetual terror across the world, including in the United States? And I have to say, our attention must be directed to the possibility that there will be terror attacks in the United States very soon. With the entrance of the Syrian refugees into the United States, there is the great possibility that there will be a terrorist attack on American soil, blamed on the Syrian refugees, blamed on ISIS, but engineered by the Western intelligence agencies. And once that happens, I really am concerned for the direction in which this country will go. We are already heading in a very bad direction. We've already arrived at the thing that many of us feared years ago. So, is America becoming a police state? No, it is a police state. America is a shell of its former self. It's a pathetic service economy. It's a joke in terms of what we have here. Our economic situation is getting bleaker. Are we a nation that promotes peace and democracy? No, we're a nation that promotes war and destruction and oppression. We are that nation. But as bad as things are, they can get worse. And if a terrorist attack occurs in the United States, that's exactly what will happen. If you think that the 9/11 attacks were bad, that only got the ball rolling faster, taking over from where Clinton and his Oklahoma City farce began. But now we've got to wonder what this will look like. Remember, I've talked about this many times on the show before. We had Dick Cheney saying, "What if a terrorist put a nuclear device on the back of a flatbed truck and drove it outside the Beltway and detonated it?" We had Lindsey Graham saying, "What if there was a nuclear bomb exploded in the Charleston Harbor?" We've had other people saying that ISIS is coming across the Mexican border and they plan to bomb major cities, detonate nuclear devices in major cities all across the country. We have reports. So we have media, television shows. We've had movies where this is the scenario, right? Predictive programming from Hollywood. And we know that this does tend to produce sort of predictive, not just predictive programming, but trained acquiescence in people as they watch these things over the years. But just imagine what would happen if there was a major terror attack, even if it was just one city with one major bomb in the United States. Can you imagine the level of domestic crackdown that we would experience? Think about the American population, and this is an important point I want to make, how radicalized the American population has become. And make no mistake, radicalization can take place. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in an MK Ultra lab, right? This can be done on a mass scale. Groups are terrifying. Individuals on their own are not so much terrifying. They are often reasonable, but groups are not reasonable. They answer to a strange logic. There is no logic to what a group will do. There is no morality to a group. That is what is so frightening. And in America, we are subjected to constant propaganda through the media. We are a population that moves off the couch when we're forced to. And we're forced to only get off the couch so we can pay the bills, so we can get back on the couch and watch the TV, right? Watch movies, watch television shows, watch reality TV, watch sports, watch the advertisements that come through, and watch Fox News and CNN. And all of these stations, all of these news media apparatus are radicalizing America. The alternative, I won't say the alternative media, but the Soros-funded foundation media, the Soros-funded foundation organizations are busy radicalizing people as we speak. Fox News is busy radicalizing people as we speak. La Raza is radicalizing people as we speak. Zionist organizations are radicalizing people as we speak. White supremacist organizations, yes, they're radicalizing people as we speak. And the reason I say that is because in the United States, we are being geared for a situation in which we have severe civilian disturbance and possible some type of potential violently armed conflicts between different groups. And this is because the Fox News crowd is promoting to white people, white conservatives, that anyone who isn't a white conservative is dangerous to them and wants to destroy them, right? Any Muslim is a terrorist. Every Muslim is a terrorist. Every refugee wants to cut off their head. Every Mexican wants to rape their women. Every black person wants to rob them and kill them. And every liberal is wanting to impose communism and kill their children. The Soros-funded foundation organizations, the cultural Marxists, have got their hands deep and their grips deep into the black community with the opposite ideology, that every white person is evil, that whiteness is evil, that any white person that says anything is guilty of a microaggression against the black community, that it's a major conspiracy to keep the black population down on the part of the average working class white person. Everything is racist. Your failures are attributed to someone else's racism. It's pathetic, but it is radical, and that it is working. The same thing with a lot of Muslim groups as well, promoting the same fanatical narratives that we see being promoted in France. I go through this to point out to you, not to shore up any mainstream propaganda, but the United States is being geared through propaganda to see each other as the enemy, to get whites and blacks to see each other as the enemy, to get Christians and Muslims to see each other as the enemy, to get Jews and non-Jews to see each other as the enemy, gays and straights, men, women. It is a plan of social division. You get everyone radicalized to the point that they cannot function without some type of attack upon them, right? Without some type of grievance. They can't function without that. They see it everywhere. Everywhere they turn is an aggression upon them. They become aggressive. And it feeds upon itself. Once you get the wick lit, it constantly feeds upon itself. And I'm very worried now that Americans have fallen for this to the point that if something major happens, they will be incapable of showing any type of united front, period, because they hate each other so much. So I would encourage people to step away from this propaganda. If you're a Fox News listener, if you're a George Soros-funded foundation activist, I would hope you're listening to this show, but I hope you haven't turned it off by now. But I would encourage you to get out of these groups. I would encourage you to turn off Fox News. And if you're a listener to this show who's being radicalized to hate an entire group, then you should back away from the stations or organizations that are getting you to do that. Because this is not how we should move forward. Now, this is not to say that you should be ignorant and that you should just walk around in a haze of positivity and think that everything will be all right and no group will ever harm you. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that it's time that we drop the childish behavior here and recognize what the media is intending to do, what the media is doing to the country in terms of division, because it's going to be very dangerous very soon as things continue to go down the tubes. We're going to have a very dangerous situation here in America, and we have to prepare for that. Also, some basic preparation in the near coming months is not a bad idea. We are being faced with the potential for an economic crash. We've been facing that for years, but it does seem that there is a bit of quiet before the storm, but it does seem to be on the horizon. I'm not saying it's coming next week. I'm just saying that you might need to start looking at what you can do to prepare for these things. The potential for nuclear war, it's real. The Syrian situation now has NATO bombing, it has Russia bombing, it has Iranian and Hezbollah forces involved. We are essentially seeing not just the potential, but the setup for a third world war here, and this would necessarily take the version of the thermonuclear type. So this is something to look at, not to be panicked. Again, I want to encourage people not to panic. We've had enough of panic in the alternative media to where we're just glued to radio shows and glued to websites, and we do nothing. We don't speak out. We don't get active. This is the problem. This is why we're in the situation we're in. You are supposed to look at a situation, analyze it for what it's worth in terms of reality, and make a decision. Do you think this is going to happen? Then you can prepare, but you can also do something to stop it. You don't have to just hunker down in a bunker and do nothing, but you should also not just simply engage in nothing but activism as well. There needs to be some type of self-preservation, so we're going to encourage you to do that. Now, let's get back to some of the more news-related issues. I want to continue mentioning the situation in Syria. Sorry. Now, I want to bring up this Russian plane crash, and we're going to have much more to say about the Russian plane crash in the possibly the next show. We don't want to spend time on false flags. Again, as I said earlier, false flags should be debunked as quickly as possible, but we can't waste our time running after every false flag because we're simply going to be falling into a minefield of distraction if we do that. But I've got this article. This goes all the way back to the 10th of November. Israel running drills as Russian plane crashes. And I think you should take a look at that if you're interested in this situation of the Russian jet airliner that was crashed over the Sinai Peninsula. So, again, it's one of the hallmarks of a false flag attack if there's a presence of a military drill occurring shortly before or after the event in question. The Russian airliner over the Sinai, the subsequent claims of that there was a crash due to the placement of a bomb on board the plane, that does seem to be accurate, that there was a bomb on board the plane, but we should also realize that this shows some potential treachery here, and this is a situation in which the Western and Israeli and NATO and GCC intelligence forces control the very terrorist organization that were supposedly responsible for bombing the aircraft. So before, during, and after the Russian jet crashed, we had the Israeli military, along with the United States, Germany, Austria, Britain, France, Greece, and Poland. All of them were engaged in a drill that involved a fictional enemy state. The drill was named Blue Flag, and it was the second Blue Flag exercise since 2013. In fact, in 2013, it was the largest drill the Israeli Air Force had ever taken part in up to that point in time. The Israeli Air Force captain in charge of the exercises stated that all of the participating militaries cooperated every step of the way. The exercise began on October the 18th and was scheduled to run until November 5th. And this is what the Times of Israel reported. It says, quote, "Those requests from participating countries came together to form the plan for Blue Flag, which sent Israeli and American F-15 squadrons along with Israeli, Hellenic, and Polish F-16 squadrons, flying through nearly all of Israel's airspace, firing simulated weapons against fictional enemy missile launchers, convoys, and aircraft," he said. This is the captain. "Though the drill was intensive and demanding, it was designed more to test the mettle of the men and women behind the controls than to test the technical capabilities of the fighter jets themselves. We wanted it to be challenging for the airmen rather than for the machines," said the IAF captain, who cannot be named for security reasons. In order to put the airmen through their paces, he explained, the people running the exercise tried to suppress them, to surprise them, putting them in situations where the pilot doesn't know where their target is coming from. We also had Defense News reporting that the drill had been concluded by October 29th. We also had the Times of Israel saying November 5th, so there's question. But this is what the website described it as. It says, quote, "Hundreds of air warriors and technicians from Israel, the U.S., Greece, and Poland concluded here Thursday for a 2-week drill designed to hone the type of joint planning, targeting, and coordinated command and control demanded by coalitions operating in complex Mideast theaters. It involved dozens of F-15 and F-16 fighters flying nearly 250 sorties over much of the country in scenarios that simulated air-to-air battles and attacks on fixed and moving targets amid threats from surface-to-air missile batteries and shoulder-fired missiles," end quote. The drill took place mostly in the Arava Desert that is located near the southern region of Israel, but all available airspace over Israel was taken advantage of, and much of the country was covered in the exercise. The fact that Israel conducted this air drill around the same time as the Russian plane crash is not a smoking gun of the Israeli government, but it's highly suspicious to say the least. Consider how many times in the past a military drill has been conducted shortly before or during or after a major terrorist attack that's subsequently used for propaganda purposes, and that certainly this Russian plane crash meets the standards for that. So at best, they certainly did not allow a tragedy to go to waste. They certainly didn't allow that to happen. Now, another word about Israel. We gotta mention another thing about Israel. We had on November 11th a flurry of reports in the mainstream and independent media that Israel struck inside Syria once again. This time near the international airport in Damascus. And throughout these reports, it remained somewhat unclear about what the targets of the attack were, whether it was Syrian military installations or weapons depots or civilians or civilian infrastructure, or something else entirely. From what I can tell, and it didn't happen, and I'll go through this. There were no immediate comments from the Syrian government when that happened, but I could find no actual mention of the Syrian media reports. The mainstream media kept saying Syrian media reports that Israel bombed near Damascus. Well, they didn't. They didn't report that at all. The Syrian media was quiet about this, which is one hallmark of the fact that Israel didn't do it. And it's not that they're innocent that there was a bombing and it happened. There was no bombing. That's what I'm trying to say here. I looked at the Syrian media reports that actually came from the Israeli media. So I went to the Israeli media to see what the Israelis had to say, because the Syrians were saying nothing. And I finally tracked down the source of the Syrian media reports, and all it was a, quote, Facebook page associated with the regime, end quote. A Facebook page. There was a Facebook post, but there was no attack. There's no report of the attack. All it was a Facebook post, and the entire mainstream media went crazy. Isn't that funny that they make fun of the alternative media for going with information that may have come from a forum or something like that, but they take a Facebook page post from someone who is not the Syrian government, and it is even questionable whether or not they're even associated with the government at all, that they take that and they run with it and it becomes a mainstream story, and it's all over the media, it's all over Yahoo, it's all over Google, it's all over all the home pages, it's all over the mainstream media pages. But there's no evidence that it ever took place. In fact, it's quite evidence to the contrary that it did not actually take place. So we are going to continue discussing this. But first, we've only got limited time here. We've only got a few minutes left, and I want to talk about some stories that came out in my absence. I want to throw a few of these out. We have this question of U.S. bombing Syrian civilian power stations. This in early October, which happened. We have Russians dropping bombs and missiles on top of ISIS all across Syria. They lobbed cruise missiles from the Caspian, regular sortie missions, combat helicopter attacks all against ISIS and all these relatively moderate cannibals and terrorists. But the United States in early October launched a bombing mission of its own against 2 power plants in Aleppo. We have these power plants located in Al-Rudwaniyah, which is east of Aleppo, and it resulted in power outages affecting the Syrian people, not the terrorists, of course, because they're not aiming at the terrorists, they're aiming at the Syrian people and Syrian military, and it added to the American tradition of bombing civilian infrastructure instead of ISIS and other terrorist targets in Syria. So just talk one more up to that. The power outages, of course, only further contributed to the misery surrounding the people of Aleppo, who've been bombarded by barbarians funded by the United States and NATO, who are intent on raping and beheading their way through the city and declaring their caliphate of pre-civilization on a civilized people. We should also never fail to point out that the U.S. bombing campaign is a violation of international law, unlike the Russian campaign. The Russian forces were invited into the country by the legitimate government. The American forces are not invited. They're not welcome. They're not wanted. They're in violation of the law. The U.S., of course, is maintaining that its bombing campaign is actually directed at ISIS, but to date, very little damage has been done to ISIS structures or their facilities or their personnel by any American airstrikes. Only when ISIS fighters are threatening a Western interest, like an oil well owned by a Western company, or when NATO has been unable to simply redirect ISIS via an embedded proxy or commander or something to that effect, do terrorists actually find themselves getting bombed by really what's just simply an act of death squad hurting. The United States has repeatedly bombed oil refineries and bridges and grain silos and food distribution facilities and other civilian infrastructure and civilian areas. The U.S. support of ISIS now can scarcely be denied, given the fact that the U.S. in collusion with NATO and GCC and Israel were responsible for the creation of the terror group to begin with, as well as for inserting it into Syria for the purpose of destroying the secular government of Bashar al-Assad. The American reaction to the Russian campaign of bombing of ISIS is telling. The U.S. State Department panicked through fits, and they still are, over the Russian bombing of terrorist targets. Even with the best PR money that you can buy these guys with, they can only best be described as relatively moderate. That's the new term now, relatively moderate. So, in relation to heart-eating cannibals and baby killers and perpetrators of some of the most grotesque murders that we've ever seen, just about anybody might appear moderate, but none of these savages fighting against Assad in Syria are even moderate in comparison, since despite their presence in in different brigades and different units of terror organizations, complete with a myriad of different names. They're all part of the same overarching organization that's controlled and backed and funded and directed by the West. There were never any moderate rebels in Syria to begin with. There are no relatively moderate rebels operating in Syria today. The Syrians recognize this. The Iranians and Hezbollah recognize this. The Russians recognize this. It's time for the American people to join the reality-based community and recognize this as well. Now, a word on Hillary before we run out of time. Again, the difference it makes. 36 Reasons Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President. You can buy that in hard copy paperback format on Amazon, $9.99. You can buy it in Kindle on Amazon for 99 cents, or you could just get it for free on my website. Click on the icon there at the top right-hand corner. Got to mention Hillary. Remember the "We Came, We Saw, He Died" psychopathy that she demonstrated on her television interview. We've got to remember, I just want to mention this because we released an article. It's in the book, and we want to do as much as we can to make sure this witch never sees the White House. Hillary Clinton, along with the State Department staff like Susan Rice and Victoria Nuland, were out in front building up the case for war against Libya with that UN resolution and support for the terrorists attempting to overthrow Gaddafi. There was an article entitled "Hillary's War: How Conviction Replaced Skepticism in Libya Intervention" by the Washington Post's the writer Joby Warwick, who describes Clinton providing yeoman service in the effort to build what they called an international coalition against Libya and Gaddafi, and how she worked overtime to see to it that the nation with the highest living standards in Africa was reduced to a burning desert of rubble and savagery. You want to see what a Hillary Clinton presidency would like, go to Libya if you want to see what it would look like. This is Hillary's handiwork, a country that is now in absolute chaos and anarchy and violence and destruction and oppression and fanaticism. Even the Huffington Post was forced to admit that Hillary Clinton was one of the main forces promoting the war in Libya. They've also pointed out that she was one of the many in the U.S. State Department and other governing bodies who supported the same. So Clinton just would not stop at any lengths to push the United States into another war. She's supported all of them. Remember, Clinton was right out in front with the propaganda line that Gaddafi was using rape and sexual violence to intimidate and oppress Libyan women. They even said he was handing out Viagra for this purpose. That stupidity, that stupid propaganda line came from the Clinton State Department. What will a presidency look like? U.S. Ambassador Susan Rice, of course, was the main purveyor of the myth, but she was in the State Department. That was Hillary Clinton's directives. So we know that the hands of Hillary Clinton are dripping with Libyan blood, and if she's ever allowed to become president, those hands are undoubtedly going to be drenched with the blood of innocent civilians the world over. It cannot happen. This woman must be stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
Aussie Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.